the Friar's Tale and the Troubadour's Tale. Jean, Jacob, and William are sitting at a table by a shuttered window. I'm across the room, watching. They've eaten their fill, when Fort lies at their feet, gnawing on a mutton bone, her strong yellow teeth scraping away the last scraps of meat and gristle. The innkeeper agreed to give them room and board and to forgive the rent on the stable space in exchange for the donkey. Children thought that that trade was more than fair. William told them he'd carry the sacks himself. Well, they now sit on the bench beside the children, the sacks with the books, the only Talmuds in all of France. They balance in the children's minds as on one end of a seesaw. I can see it in their faces. And on the other end, Michelangelo's burned body. At some moments, the books are lifted into the air and the children feel grateful and proud. And then, for no apparent reason, the balance shifts and Michelangelo rises in their thoughts, his slumped body, the dancing flames, his burning flesh, and the books go plummeting to earth. It's too much, Jean says, pushing the last of her brown stew around with a spoon. What is? William asks. Life is. How can you have such pain and such triumph all mixed together? It's like that cheese. What? It's like cheese, says William. Doesn't matter, Jean mutters, but I know what she means. Why, Jacob says, does God allow it? Suddenly, a drunken voice rises from the far corner of the inn. Is that theology I hear? The Franciscan, who is asleep on the table, has raised his tonsured head. I can see the children exchange glances with one another. The glances say, don't answer him, maybe he'll go back to sleep. Hey, the friar shouts, lurching at his feet and gathering his brown robes around him. I want to discuss theology. No one's discussing theology over here, William says, not turning his head. But the friar says, you're a liar. He pushes the stool out of the way and begins to stumble over to the children. His hair makes a curly fringe around his shining pate. He noisily, laboriously drags an entire bench from a neighboring table over to the children's, and the children's watch in slightly amused horror. So, he says, what are we discussing? Theology, says Jacob. Jean suppresses a smile. Ah, yes, says the friar. Then he puts his arms on the table and lays his head on them as if he were going to sleep. The children look at one another, not sure whether to laugh or to change tables. But then he lifts his wobbly head. You asked the hardest questions in all theology. If God is all good and if God is all powerful, why does God let bad things happen? Children stop smiling. The stragglers in the far corner have put their mugs down on the sticky tabletop and are watching the group of strange children and the drunken friar. Yes, Jacob says after a moment, that's my question. It's hard, says the friar. He raises himself up from the bench and his two thin hands are gripping the edges of the table as if the floor were pitching beneath him. He fixes Jacob with a dizzy, furious stare. Who are you? He suddenly shouts. The men in the corner laugh. The innkeeper looks up from where he's swabbing a table. Master Bacon, if you can't keep civil, I'll throw you out. But the friar, Master Bacon apparently, is still staring at Jacob and rocking slightly back and forth. Who are you? He bellows again. I can smell his stale ale breath from 2 tables away. That is what God asked Job when Job asked what you asked. Who are you? Huh? Says Jacob. Fascinating. William covers a smile. with his wide hand. Listen, it's not funny, Master Bacon says to William, listing forward as if the end had just crested a wave. Who are you? God asks. Were you there when I created the great whale? As his argument gains momentum, he begins to regain mastery of his tongue. When I created the monsters of the deep, the things you don't even know about. Were you there? The friar looks down on Jacob as if the point were undebatable. No, says Jacob, I wasn't. Aha! The drunken master shouts, pointing a long finger, white and bony and red at the tip, at Jacob. You weren't there, so how can you know what's good and what's bad? How can you understand God's plan? It's greater than you. Can you see every leaf in the forest? No. Do you know every bird in this, what every bird is on the face of the earth? And Jacob shakes his head. Can you track the paths of the fishes as they swim? Every fish in every river and ocean? Master Bacon is waving his long finger about like a sword. No, I can't. So you can't understand God's plan. Only God can. But we must try. We must try. I have devoted my whole life to trying. I study the birds and the bees and the stars and the trees. Now Master Bacon appears to be singing. The rivers and the streams, the sun and the moonbeams. Jean starts to laugh, which seems to bring Master Bacon back to reality. We weren't there when God created the earth, but we live on the earth now. So we must try to study it as best we can, since it's all a part of God's plan. Then, when bad things happen, at least we can understand them a little bit. And that helps. God knows that helps. Master Bacon sighs, and then he lies down on his bench. Quadra demonstrandum. The children stare. After a moment, the friar is snoring noisily. I watch Jean and Jacob and William look at one another. William scratches his head. I've got an answer to your question. This is a different voice coming from the far corner of the tavern where the two men have been sitting. One of them stands up, and I see he's wearing the fancy sleeves of a troubadour, though they're caked with dirt of the road. The one who's still sitting, he's got big front teeth like a rabbit. He says, no one wants to hear your theories, Chrétien. Chrétien ignores his companion. You got to hear a song first, though. Do you want to hear a song? Well, there's only one right answer to that question, at least when it's asked by a troubadour. What else do you get to hear real music outside a church? The children confer with just a glance. Well, of course they do. I'm no cheap jongleur either, you know. I sing for lords and ladies. One day I'll sing for the king himself. Sure you will, says his companion, his lip curling back around his two prominent teeth. Chrétien ignores him. He ducks under the table, picks up a guitar, or maybe it's a lute. I can never tell the difference, and plucks a few notes. This is an old song, he says, from the time of Charlemagne, the Song of Hildebrand. He begins to sing. His voice is pure and round and haunting, like the call of an owl. When Fort comes out from under the table and cocks her head, Master Bacon snores on his bench. Outside, it has begun to rain.
Ah, the tale of Hildebrand I sing. Quiet, while I pluck these strings. Do not, dear children, turn away. I think you'll like this if you stay and hear my song of war and death and blood and warriors' last breaths. The minstrel strums some new chords and continues. In wars of old they spared the lives of soldiers young and weeping wives by sending forth a champion to fight alone, just man to man. One sunny day across a dell, King Dietrich faced Lord Haberfell. So Dietrich's army first sent out a warrior who was fierce and stout, but old and creased like ancient elm. He stood out front with sword and helm, and then from out the other side, famous Hadgebrand came striding wide into the center of the field, till the two men stood, shield to shield. The older man announced, I will know the name of the man I kill. What is your land? Who is your kin? Hadgebrand answered, my sire is him, now long dead, called Hildebrand, who died a hero in foreign lands. Staggered was the older man. His chainmail shook, he scarce could stand. His lips did ope, but no sound came. His ears resounded with his own name. Hildebrand, he said at length, trying to master his shaken strength. And were you born by old Cologne? If so, I call you now my son. The battlefield fell deathly still. No sheep cried o'er the graying hills. My son, the old man cried. Who told you that your father died? He fell upon a grieved knee, and to his lost long son he reached. Take hand, my darling boy, take my hand, my life's last joy. But Hadgebrand stood off and sneered as the old man shedding old man tears. You expect me to believe such games? You think I was born yesterday? This is how you've grown so old, with cowardly tricks and lies you told. My father, Hildebrand, is dead. You've used his name, now lose your head. Hadgebrand, my darling boy, this is no game, no trick, no toy. The old man wept and swore it true, but Hadgebrand would not be moved. The ancient bones creaked with pain as Hildebrand stood up again. 30 years in foreign climes, always placed in the front lines. And how many times have I fallen? None. But now I may fall at the hands of my son. I could kneel down and forfeit to you. Perhaps you would then believe the truth. But thus my soldiers would be taken, and then I would deprive their children of fathers, as you were deprived, living an orphan all of your life. So Hadgebrand, my darling child, who laughed and played so pretty and wild and bounced and sang upon my lap and on my shoulder took his nap. Now you may kill me. Do your worst. Unless I kill you, my beloved, first. Then they let sail their ashen spears and ran at each other over years of absence and of childhood missed, and fought one another when they should have kissed. They split each other's bright oak shields, hacking and hewing, refusing to yield.
The troubadour, Chrétien, plays a few more notes and then lowers himself onto a stool. The inn is cradled in silence. The haunting melody with its simple drone, still echoes among the rough wooden benches and tables. The only other sound is the snoring of Master Bacon. William speaks first. What happens? Who wins? The father or the son? Schwetbian replies, we don't know. That's where the song ends. That's the saddest song I've ever heard, says Jacob. I hated it. I love it, murmurs Jean. It's so rich and sad and beautiful. It feels true. Chrétien points at her. That's what I meant. That's my answer to your question. You asked why God would make bad things happen. I'll tell you why. God is a troubadour. The troubadour's rabbit-toothed companion pipes up from the corner. Not self-important, are we, Chrétien? Listen. He's deadly serious. He leans forward on a stool, and though half the inn lies between him and the children, he seems to be whispering to them alone. Life is a song, composed and sung by God. We are but characters in his song. Hildebrand doesn't think his song is beautiful. He's either going to kill his son or die himself. It's not beautiful to him at all. But that's because he can't hear it. He's in it. You can't hear a song you're in, right? Children are squinting at this troubadour. Right, says William reluctantly. So, if we could hear our own songs, if we could see God's creation the way God does, we would know it's the most beautiful song there is. Jacob is frowning. What kind of God is that who would write such sad songs? Why would he make us suffer for a beauty we can't even see? William and Jean nod, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. Why, Jacob continued, his voice rising, would he destroy all the Talmuds in France and make Michelangelo die and my parents? What's so damn beautiful about that? His voice echoes over the silent inn. Even the rain seems to have gone quiet. Who's Michelangelo? Chrétien asks after a space. It doesn't matter. A friend of ours, our teacher. He's dead. Oh, I'm sorry, says the troubadour. That isn't beautiful at all. So your theory is stupid. Your teacher's death isn't beautiful, and your parents' death certainly isn't, Chrétien continues, but the song might still be. No one speaks. The rain begins again. The innkeeper stands up and raises his arms above his head, arching his back and pushing his round belly out as far as it can go. Bedtime, he says, sighing. Look, your dog has joined Roger in the land of dreams. Indeed, Gwenfort is now curled on the floor right under Master Bacon's bench, her flank rising and falling with shallow breath. And tomorrow, the innkeeper asked the children, as the troubadours collect their instruments, where are you off to? William does not wait to consult his friends. Mont Saint-Michel, he says, we have some books to save. This is my moment. I see it, like a break in the clouds. When the sun shines through, it's an opportunity that may never come again. Don't screw it up, I tell myself. Do you know how to get there, I say? To Mont Saint-Michel? I don't want to sound eager, just an offhand question. It's pretty far. The children look at one another. William shrugs. Jean and Jacob shake their heads. I can lead you if you want, I say. And then, because the truth is often a better ruse than a lie, I add, I'm curious to see what happens to you next. William says, well, we'll have to move quietly, stay hidden, sleep in ditches and behind walls. Well, that's not a problem. I do that all the time. He fixes me with a quizzical stare and then consults his two smaller companions. It's better than having to stop and ask for directions at every town, he admits. Jean and Jacob glance at each other. Jacob turns his palms upward. You can come, Jean tells me. I am elated. I try not to show it, though. The morning is wet and shining, and I am swelled with the idea that I'll be setting forth with the children, the famous children, and their dog. I wish I could tell myself that I had planned it this way. Sometimes God, though, smiles on the fox and puts the rabbit right in his path. The innkeeper gives us breakfast, and we set off among the dripping branches and raindrop-gilded ferns for Normandy. So, William says to me after I pointed out the road north, and when Fort has sniffed out a path just east of it in the shadows of the trees, what is your station in life, or your trade? I am prepared for the question. My trade is tales, I say. I collect them. Like a chronicler, William asks. Sort of. Do you tell them? Jean wants to know, like a troubadour? To the right people and at the right time, I reply. Are we, Jacob says, the right people? His gaze has become suspicious. I don't blame him. That was too cryptic an answer. Well, you don't need to hear the story I'm collecting now, I say. You know, it's your story. Why would you collect our story? Jean wants to know. Don't you think it's interesting and special? I ask. I don't know, maybe. Of course it is. And who, William asks, are the right people to hear our story? This question is shrewd. Too shrewd. You walked into that one, Etienne, I think. I say, there's a turning just ahead. Let's not miss it. I push forward through the brush, trying to catch up with Gwen Fort. I can feel the children's eyes on my back. The first day passes swiftly. We keep to the woods as long as we can, clambering over fallen trees and beating our way through thorn bushes. By sunset, though, the forest has disappeared, replaced by rolling wheat fields and cow pastures. Normandy, breadbasket and butter churn of France. Jean points out that there's no use tramping over fields instead of on the road, since in the fields we'll be equally visible and more conspicuous. Smart kid. So as the yellow sun falls to its knees on the horizon, we return to the road. That night we lie down in a sheepfold deep in a pasture. Gwen Fort scares off the sheep as we approach, which leaves the structure vacant, but cold. As we settle in, I wish at least a couple of sheep had stayed behind. Now I understand why Jean's family sleeps with her cow. Before the darkness settles completely, William opens the blood-flecked sacks of books. Jean examines a Latin volume with beautiful illuminations in blue, red, and gold leaf. I don't think she can read, but her brown hair swings over the page as her eyes follow the curling vines and grotesque beasts that run up and down the margins. She cries out when she finds an illustration of a greyhound. She shows it to Gwen Fort, but Gwen Fort just tries to lick it. William cradles a book by St. Augustine in his big hands. Grand capitals in bright red ink announce the beginning of each new chapter. Jacob opens a slim volume of Hebrew and balances it on his knees. No illuminations in these pages, just the shaky letters of an amateur scribe. How did you learn to read? I asked Jacob as his fingers scanned the letters right to left. We have a bet midrash in our village, Jacob says, then catches his breath. At a bet midrash, I mean, all the boys learn to read there. A lot of girls, too. The children go back to their books. I am not tempted to read one myself. These children are more interesting to me than any book. They look so young, their faces bent over the pages, squinting against the dying light. William looks so much like a child, a very, very big child. Jacob looks a lot like I did when I was his age, small and thin and wary. And little Jean, peering at the illuminations in the book on her lap, is no daughter of Eve, bringer of sin to the world. Looking at her now, pushing her tangled hair from her face, the idea is ludicrous, an insult. I'd really rather not kill them. Jacob puts down one book and opens another. Hey, he says, this isn't a Talmud. This is the Bible. It is? Jean leans over as if looking at the page of Hebrew will help. Listen. Vayakam melech shadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yara e Yosef. Jean and William look at him blankly. Jean tilts his head back. A new king rose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. It's the beginning of the Shema, Exodus, the second book of the Bible. William says, I don't think my abbot would have sent the Bible to be burned. Does he read Hebrew? William hesitates. I think he reads a little, not like Brother Jerome. So maybe he didn't know. William is silent. Jacob says, I wonder how many Bibles were burned yesterday. I wonder too. I look out into the darkness. But when I look back at the children, I can tell they're not thinking of Bibles burning. They're thinking of Michelangelo. Out in the fields, a sheep bleats in the pattering rain. Later, as the children sleep, I take the knife out of its scabbard under my shirt. I rub the edge with my fingers. It is very, very sharp. I watch the children sleeping, the breath flowing in and out of their innocent bodies. The morning shimmers with fallen rain, but despite the mud on the road, we make good time. That night, we sneak into a mill that is lying quiet for the evening. The children lean against a wooden wall in the last light of sunset. I did not sleep last night. Doubt tormented me like a devil's pitchfork. I could have acted as the children lay in a dream, and I did not. Why? Why couldn't I? Now I feel ill, but at least my decision has been made. Tonight, I grip the knife under my cloak. Jacob has opened one of the books and is translating, haltingly, but with obvious pleasure. And so, Jacob reads, one day a stranger came to one of the leading Jewish sages, Shammai. Is this the Bible? Jean says. No, Talmud. Yes, read us the Talmud, William exclaims. I want to hear what all this has been about. Let's hear the wisdom of the Jews. Jacob bends his head over the brown letters, and the stranger said to Shammai, can you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot? Do you know what Rabbi Shammai did? He took a stick and beat the stranger until the man finally went away. I tried to stifle a laugh. Jacob stops reading. He looks up at his friends. That's the Talmud? Jean says. No, that's the story, Jacob mutters, his pale forehead creasing. William says, what's the book Michelangelo died for? For that? He looks like he's going to be sick. Jean begins to stroke Wentworth's back. Hard. The greyhound wriggles away from her and trots over to a hole in the flimsy wooden wall and sniffs at it. Jacob examines the page. Wait, there's more. Well, I hope it gets better, says William. Then the stranger went to the great teacher, Hillel, and the stranger said, teach me the whole of the Torah while I stand on one foot. Hillel did not beat him with a rod. William buries his head in his hand. Hillel said, fine, stand on one foot. So the stranger did. And then the rabbi said, what you would hate to have done to you, do not do to other people. That is the whole of the Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go and study. William raises his face to Jacob. What you would have to have done to you, do not do to other people, he repeats. That's what Jesus says in reverse, says Jean. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Which came first, William asks. Jacob says, my rabbi used to say that Hillel was one of Jesus's teachers. I don't know if that's true, though. It's true, I say. The children look at me. I feel feverish. I press the cold blade of the knife against my skin. I learned that at the cathedral school of Avignon. You went to a cathedral school? William asks. He sounds skeptical. I don't blame him. The cathedral schools are for the wealthiest and most promising boys in Christendom. Dressed as I am in cheap traveling clothes, I seem to have fallen far in the world. And I have. I say, Jesus taught that the greatest commandment was to love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. Why am I talking? Keep quiet. You're going to give yourself away. And the second greatest commandment was like it, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. I never got that. I was loving God Almighty and perfect and divine, like loving your sinful, crooked neighbor. They're completely different. They couldn't be more different. Am I shouting? I grip the knife inside my cloak. I feel dizzy. You think, says Jean. She leans back against the wood of the old mill and sleepily pulls her royal blue tunic over her head. I don't know. They seem the same to me. Gwenfort goes and lies down beside Jean. But William's eyes are roving over my face. Who are you? He says quietly. Sweat is pouring from my scalp, over my eyebrows, into my eyes. What's wrong with me? Children are staring at me. Jean sits up. They can tell something is wrong. They can tell, I know it. I feel like I'm standing on the top of a bell tower, staring at the ground 40 fathoms below. My name is Etienne d'Arles, I say. I am at the top of a bell tower and the wind is blowing hard at my back. My thumb brushes against the blade of the knife. It splits the top layer of my skin. Tell us, Jacob says. I have the strange sensation that he is looking through me. Tell us more. Yes, says Jean. Please. The famous children are asking me. Me. I cannot stop myself.